She threw them out on a Tuesday, which was the slowest day of the week, and therefore the day she allowed herself the small luxury of doing what she actually thought. 18 long-stem red roses. Premium grade, ordered by phone at 9:15 that morning, by a man who gave his credit card number in the flat, impatient tone of someone who considered paying for things an inconvenience rather than a transaction. The card was in the name of Edoardo Renzi. The delivery address was an apartment on Via della Lungaretta that Chiara knew because she had delivered there before. A woman named Giulia, who ordered white peonies on her birthday every March and always left a note for Chiara in the delivery box afterward, saying thank you in handwriting that tilted slightly to the left. The name on the card that Edoardo Renzi had asked her to write, in her best script on cream cardstock, was, "From your devoted husband." Chiara held the card for a moment. Then she put the roses in the bin. All 18 of them. Stems first, so the heads wouldn't bruise. She was a professional. What she didn't know, what Edoardo Renzi didn't know either, which would matter considerably more, was that Giulia's actual husband had called the shop at 9:45, 30 minutes after Edoardo Renzi's order, asking whether his wife's birthday flowers had been dispatched yet. He called from a private number. He said his name the way people say names that carry weight in certain rooms, quietly, briefly, without emphasis, the way you don't need to describe gravity. His name was Matteo Caruso, and the flowers, as Chiara was about to discover, had not been dispatched. Because they were in the bin, because she had put them there. And she would do it again. The shop had been called Radici since Chiara's mother opened it 31 years ago, which meant roots, which had seemed poetic in 1993 and had become, in the last 14 months, a kind of dark joke. Roots implied something fixed in the ground, something that couldn't be moved. Chiara's landlord had sent the new lease agreement on a Wednesday in September, certified mail, with a cover letter that used the word adjustment 4 times, as though repetition would sand down the edges of what he was actually saying. The rent had been €4,000 a month for 11 years. The adjusted rent was $11,800. She had read the letter at the counter with a customer waiting, and it said, very calmly, "Just a moment," and gone into the back room and stood among the buckets of dahlias and breathed. Then she had gone back out and finished the arrangement. She had done the same calculation every night for 14 months. The shop brought in, on a good month, €8,000 to €9,000. Rent, suppliers, the part-time girl she employed on Saturdays, utilities, it left her approximately zero on a good month, with which to address the $54,000 in arrears she had accumulated since the September letter, while she waited for a legal challenge that her solicitor kept describing as promising in the specific tone that meant expensive. Her ex-husband Marco had called twice since the lease crisis, both times to ask if she'd thought about closing the shop. Both times, she had ended the call. Radici had her mother's handwriting on the sign above the door. Her mother had painted it herself on a Saturday in June, with yellow paint and a brush she'd bought at the hardware shop on the corner, which was also gone now, replaced by a wine bar that closed at 4 a.m. Chiara was not closing the shop. She arranged flowers in the back every morning from 6 to 8 before the deliveries came. And she talked to them the way her mother had, which she had found embarrassing as a child and now found necessary. The ranunculus were anxious in cold weather and needed to be left alone. The dahlias were vain and responded to being told they were beautiful. The peonies were straightforwardly content, which she envied them. She had been talking to a bucket of white garden roses on the Tuesday morning when the call from Edoardo Renzi came in. She recognized the name. She didn't say so. She took the order. She pulled 18 long stem reds from the cooler. She started to trim the stems, and then she looked at the card she was supposed to write, and looked at the delivery address and understood exactly what Eduardo Renzi was doing and who he was doing it to, and what it said about him, that he had chosen to do it through a shop in Giulia's own neighborhood, 300 meters from an apartment, where a woman with left-tilting handwriting left thank you notes in delivery boxes. She put the roses in the bin. Stems first. The call from Matteo Caruso came at 9:45. She answered it the way she answered every call, with the shop name and her own, and there was a pause on the other end, brief, evaluative, before the voice said, "My wife's birthday is on Thursday. I arranged for roses to be sent today, ahead of schedule, so they'd have time to open. I'm calling to confirm dispatch." "I'm sorry," Chiara said. "Could you give me the name the order was placed under?" Another pause. "The order would have been placed by a member of my household staff." A slight adjustment in his tone, not impatient, precise. "My wife's name is Giulia Caruso. The delivery address is Via della Lungaretta." The bucket of white garden roses was in front of Chiara. She looked at it. "I don't have an order under that name," she said. "Or for that address. Is it possible it was placed this morning? Within the last hour?" She thought about the 18 stems in the bin. She thought about the name Eduardo Renzi on a credit card. She thought about "From your devoted husband" written in her best script on cream card stock. "I did receive an order for that address this morning," she said carefully, "but it wasn't placed under your name or your wife's, and I wasn't able to fulfill it." A silence. "Why not?" he said. Chiara had a policy about not discussing other customers' orders. She had held this policy for 11 years. She looked at the roses in the bin, the heads still perfect, the stems clean, the whole thing still usable if she pulled them out in the next 20 minutes. And she held the policy in her mind for approximately 4 seconds. Because the name on the card, she said, was not the name of whoever placed the order. The silence on the other end of the phone changed. It became a different quality of silence. Not the silence of someone waiting for information, but the silence of someone who has just received it. "I see," he said. "I'm sorry I can't be more specific," she said. "But I thought you should know the delivery won't be arriving. Where are the flowers now?" She looked at the bin. "I'm sourcing a replacement arrangement," she said. "White garden roses and white peonies. I can have it there by 2 this afternoon if that would help." Another silence. Then yes, that would help. He paused. "Miss Conforti," she said. "Chiara Conforti." "Miss Conforti," he said. "Thank you." She delivered the arrangement herself. This was not standard practice. She had a delivery driver, a young man named Emilio, who owned a cargo bicycle and considered one-way streets advisory. But she told Emilio the route was out of his way and loaded the arrangement into her own car and drove to Via della Lungaretta at 1:45. Giulia opened the door. She was perhaps 45, with dark hair pinned up unevenly and reading glasses pushed to the top of her head and flour on the left side of her shirt. And she looked at the arrangement the way people look at things they hadn't expected and weren't sure yet how to feel about. "Oh," she said. "These are beautiful." "Happy birthday," Chiara said. "They're from your husband." Giulia touched one of the peonies. "He always remembers white," she said, almost to herself. And then, looking up, "Would you like to come in? I've just made focaccia that has gone slightly wrong but is still edible." This was also not standard practice. Chiara went in. The apartment was warm and full of books, and had a cat asleep on the radiator, and a child's drawing on the refrigerator that said "Mama" in large, uneven letters, with what appeared to be a portrait of a woman surrounded by flowers. Giulia poured coffee without asking and put the slightly wrong focaccia on a board between them, and talked about her daughter's school play and the reading glasses she kept losing and a recipe she had attempted 3 times with diminishing results. Chiara stayed for 40 minutes. When she left, she sat in her car outside the building for a moment and thought about a man who sent roses to his own mistress on his wife's birthday and used the wife's florist to do it, and felt the specific anger that lives under sadness when the sadness has been running too long to stay soft. She drove back to the shop and finished the Tuesday and went home and made dinner alone in her apartment above the street and listened to Rome do what Rome does at night, which is exist loudly without consulting anyone, and went to sleep. She did not think about the phone call again. She was not going to think about the phone call again. He came into the shop on Wednesday morning. She knew who he was before he said anything, which was not because she recognized him. She didn't. She had never seen his face. But because of the way Emilio straightened almost imperceptibly when he came through the door, the way the quality of the room shifted slightly, like a pressure change before weather. He was perhaps 45, dark coat, no tie, the kind of face that had been arranged by time rather than untouched by it, which she found more interesting than the alternative. He looked around the shop the way people look at places they are trying to understand, rather than simply to buy something from. He stopped in front of the bucket of white garden roses. "The ones you sent yesterday," he said, without looking up. "They were exactly right." "I'm glad," Chiara said. He looked at her then. His eyes were very dark and had the quality she would later try to describe to herself and fail. Not kind, exactly, but attentive in a way that meant you were being registered accurately rather than merely looked at. "My wife said the florist came herself," he said. "Emilio had a full route." "Emilio is your delivery driver." "Yes, and his route yesterday was full," Chiara said. The corner of his mouth moved. "Right," he picked up one of the white roses and turned it in his hand and set it back. "I want to thank you," he said, "for what you did yesterday. The order you didn't fulfill. I have a policy about customers' orders being correctly attributed," Chiara said. "It's standard practice. Is it standard practice to put the flowers in the bin?" She looked at him. "I heard the bin lid," he said, "during the call. And you said you couldn't fulfill the order, not that you hadn't received one." He tilted his head slightly. "You're not a liar, but you're diplomatic when it protects someone." Chiara said nothing. "It protected Giulia," he said. "Not an accusation, just a fact. The arrangement you sent instead, the white garden roses and the peonies, those aren't in any order I've ever placed with this shop. You chose them." She mentioned once that she liked peonies. She did, in a thank you note. She has a habit of leaving them. Something crossed his face, not grief, something adjacent to it, the private version. "She does," he said. "She has left them her whole life." He looked around the shop again, at the ranunculus, at the dahlias, at the handwriting above the door that said Radici in yellow paint that had faded to something between gold and ivory in 31 years of Roman sun. "Your landlord," he said. "Bernardino Fabbri." Chiara went very still. "He is," Matteo Caruso said, not looking at her. "A man who does favors for city councilors and receives favors in return. The rent increase on this property was not a market adjustment." He paused. It was a request. The air in the shop was very still. Outside, a Vespa made the argument it always made when it went up the cobblestone section of the street. "Whose request?" she said. He looked at her directly. "I think you already know. Eduardo Renzi, the city councilor. The credit card. The roses addressed from your devoted husband to a woman on Via della Lungaretta." He's been purchasing properties in this neighborhood for 3 years, Matteo said, through holding companies registered in 3 different names. Small businesses that cannot sustain increased rents close. The properties are resold at development prices. Radici is the last independent shop on this street. Chiara thought of the hardware shop, the woman who had run the bookshop next door for 22 years. The trattoria with the hand-painted menu board that her mother had taken her to on the first day of every spring. "Why are you telling me this?" she said. "Because," he said, "you did something for my wife yesterday that you did not have to do and did not announce. And I find that I would like to return the gesture." I know you don't need anything," he said. "That's not why I'm here." He paused. Renzi's arrangement with Fabri is documented. The holding companies are traceable. The connection between the rent increases and the council planning approvals is on paper, in files, in a municipality that has a very particular relationship with transparency. He looked at her steadily. "I have some experience with files." She closed early on Wednesday and walked home through Trastavia the long way, past the fountain in the piazza that had been there since before anyone's grandmother could remember, past the restaurant where the owner still wrote the menu on a chalkboard every morning in a hand so consistent it looked printed, past the place where the hardware shop used to be, which was now a wine bar with a sign that said it was authentic in a font specifically designed to suggest it wasn't. She thought about a man who had come into her shop to buy nothing, and had stayed 20 minutes, and had said, "I find that I would like to return the gesture in the same tone someone else would use to describe the weather." She thought about Giulia with flour on her shirt, and the reading glasses pushed to the top of her head, and the child's drawing on the refrigerator that said "Mama" surrounded by flowers. She thought about 18 roses in a bin, stems first. She thought about what Eduardo Renzi had done, not to Giulia, though that too, but to this street, to these shops, to her mother's yellow handwriting above a door on a cobblestone road, in a neighborhood that had existed long before his planning approvals, and intended to exist long after them. She went home and fed the cat she called Giotto because he was orange and considered himself a masterpiece, and she sat at the kitchen table with her accounts open in front of her, and closed them after 5 minutes, because there was nothing in them she hadn't already memorized, and she went to sleep earlier than usual. She did not think about dark, attentive eyes or the particular quality of a voice that registered things accurately. She was not going to do that. Thursday arrived the way birthdays do, indifferent to whether you're ready. Chiara was at the shop by 6. She was talking to the ranunculus about the cold snap when the first call came, at 7:10. A flower shop in Prati, across the river. The owner's name was Giuseppe, and they had known each other for 15 years through the suppliers' cooperative, and he said, "Without preamble, someone bought my shop this morning. Matteo Caruso's name is on the transfer. He says you'll explain." Chiara held the phone. "I don't," she started. "He said to tell you, Via della Lungaretta sends her regards." She sat down on the stool behind the counter. The second call came at 8:20, a shop in Pigneto. The third at 9:05, a shop in Ostiense, whose owner, a woman named Renata, was laughing when she called, which was not the response Chiara had been anticipating. "He walked in at 8:30 and bought the whole inventory," Renata said. "Roses, specifically. He said he needed 18 red ones for a particular purpose, and could I provide them? I said I could provide him the whole shop if he wanted. He said yes." By 10:15, Chiara had received 7 calls. By 11, she had received 11. By noon, she understood what was happening, which was both completely unreasonable and, in a way she could not immediately articulate, the most reasonable thing she had encountered in 14 months. He walked into Radici at 12:30 with the specific composure of a man who has done something considerable and considers it proportionate. 11 shops, Chiara said. 12, he said. The one in Testaccio closed before I arrived, but the owner is selling privately, and we've reached an agreement. She looked at him. You bought 12 flower shops, she said. I bought 12 flower shops, he confirmed. And the properties of 3 of them, including this one, which Fabri sold me this morning at a price he found less interesting than the alternative. What alternative? The documented connection between his rent adjustments and Renzi's planning approvals, Matteo said, which has been provided to 2 journalists and a municipal investigator as of 9 a.m. Today, he paused. Renzi's counsel position is, as of this morning, something he will be defending rather than enjoying. Chiara said nothing for a moment. You bought 12 flower shops, she said again, because it continued to be the fact that most required repeating. 11 of them I intend to sell back to their owners at the price I paid, he said. The terms will reflect the market as it existed before the intervention in rents. He looked around the shop, at the handwriting above the door, at the ranunculus, at the dahlias who were as always responding well to being looked at. This one I am not selling. This one, he said, I am offering to you. At a lease rate that reflects the market as it should be, with a term of 20 years and an option to renew, and a legal arrangement that ensures the rate cannot be adjusted without a 6-month notice period, your written consent, and a very particular set of circumstances I have made contractually difficult to manufacture. The shop was quiet. Through the window, a tourist was attempting to photograph the fountain in the piazza and being interrupted by a pigeon with no interest in the project. And the debt, Chiara said. The 54,000. Is a matter I've discussed with your solicitor, whose name I asked for through the cooperative. The arrears accrued under a lease agreement that was, as the municipal investigation will confirm, the result of coordinated interference with a legitimate business. The legal position is that the debt is contestable. Your solicitor agrees. The process has begun. Chiara looked at the roses in the cooler, the dahlias, the ranunculus who were anxious about the cold. Why 12 shops? She said. Because those are the shops on the cooperative's list that have been directly affected by Renzi's arrangement in the past 3 years, he said. I'm told by the cooperative's president that Radici is the last one still open. It is. Yes. He looked at her. I know. A silence. The pigeon outside had resolved whatever issue it had with the tourist. You have a daughter, Chiara said. Giulia's daughter. The drawing on the refrigerator. Lucia, he said. She's 7. A pause. The first thing that wasn't entirely composed, a texture under the word, the way a stone has texture when you hold it rather than look at it. She has her mother's handwriting, already even at 7. The thank you notes, Chiara said. Yes. Chiara thought about a left-tilting hand on cream paper, about a child who would grow up writing like her mother, who would grow up with the vocabulary of people who left notes after kindnesses because they could not help it. The arrangement yesterday was exactly right, she said. The peonies. It was, he said. She told me 3 times. Which means she meant it. Something moved in his face. Not grief anymore, or not only. She also told me the florist came herself and had coffee and ate the focaccia. The focaccia was good, Chiara said. She was too hard on it. She's too hard on everything she makes, he said. Except the things she gives to other people. Those she makes without second-guessing. The shop was quiet. I'll need to look at the lease documents, Chiara said. Of course. And I'll want my own solicitor to review the terms before I sign anything, I'd be surprised if you didn't. And the 20-year term is a starting point, he said, not a ceiling. She looked at him. He looked back. The quality of attention that registered things accurately, she was beginning to understand. It was not a professional manner. It was a characteristic. Something he had been born with, or had developed so early it amounted to the same thing. You didn't have to do any of this, she said. You didn't have to throw the roses away, he said. I have a policy. I know, he said. I looked up your shop after the call yesterday. You've been in Trastevere for 31 years. Your mother opened it. The handwriting on the sign is hers. The cooperative lists you as having 0 complaints and a delivery record that is, he paused, described as legendary, which I understand to mean Emilio has a complicated relationship with one-way streets. He considers them advisory, Chiara said. Yes, the corner of his mouth. Your policy on correctly attributed orders is not in your terms and conditions, but it is apparently known throughout the cooperative as simply the way Chiara does things. Chiara looked at her hands. My mother had the same policy, she said. She said a flower is a message, and a message should be honest, and if someone asks you to deliver a dishonest message, you are not a florist. You are a liar with a bow. A silence. I would like to have met her, Matteo Caruso said. Chiara looked up. His face was open in a way it hadn't been earlier. Not unguarded exactly, but less managed. The way a room looks when someone has opened a window. She would have given you coffee, Chiara said, and told you the ranunculus were anxious and the dahlias needed complimenting. Are they? He said. Anxious? She glanced at the bucket. It's cold. He walked over and looked at them, hands in his coat pockets, with the air of a man giving the matter appropriate consideration. They look, he said, like they're doing fine. Don't tell them that, Chiara said. They worry. He looked at her. She looked at him. Outside, Rome continued to exist loudly and without consulting anyone, the way it had for 2,000 years and intended to continue for at least that many more. The lease documents, she said. Tomorrow, he said. If that works. Tomorrow, she said. He nodded. He moved toward the door. He stopped. The roses, he said. The 18. You put them stems first. She blinked. How do you know that? Because you're precise, he said, and because you told me you were sourcing a replacement, which meant they were still usable, which meant you'd preserve them even while you were expressing your policy. She looked at him. I'm not sure whether to find that very logical or very strange, she said. Both, he said. Usually both. He left. She stood in the shop among the dahlias and the anxious ranunculus and the white garden roses in the cooler and the yellow handwriting above the door, and she did not move for approximately 45 seconds, which was the longest she had stood still in a working day in 11 years. Then she went into the back room. She pulled the 18 stems out of the bin, trimmed them, changed the water, set them in a fresh bucket in the cooler. She was a professional. And they were still perfectly good roses. And she could decide what to do with them tomorrow, when the man with the attentive dark eyes and 12 flower shops and a daughter who was already learning her mother's left-tilting handwriting came back with a lease agreement and a 20-year term, and a particular quality of presence that made rooms reorganize themselves without being asked. She could decide what to do with them tomorrow. The morning of the day she signed the lease, Chiara arrived at the shop at 6 and did what she always did. Talked to the ranunculus about the cold, complimented the dahlias, told the peonies they were content, and they appeared to agree. Then she took the 18 red roses from the cooler, 2 weeks old now and in the last good days of their open, which is when roses are at their most honest, and she arranged them in a vase she put on the counter. Matteo arrived at 9. He looked at the roses. He didn't say anything. They were going to be wasted, Chiara said. Of course, he said. And a flower that has been wasted is a small failure of attention, she said. My mother said that. She was right, he said. He sat across from her at the counter with the lease documents between them and the roses beside them, and Rome outside the window, doing what it always did, persisting, loudly, in the accumulated weight of everything it had survived, and they went through the terms, page by page. On page 11, there was a clause she hadn't expected. She looked up. The option to purchase, she said. If you want it, he said. In your own time, your own terms. No obligation, no timeline. She looked at the clause, at the handwriting on the wall above the door in yellow paint gone golden, at the roses, open and honest in the last good days. She looked at him. My mother would have said, she said, that this is a very complicated way of bringing someone flowers. The corner of his mouth, not quite a smile. Something that had learned to live near one. It is, he said. It worked, she said. She signed the lease. Chiara Conforti had spent 14 months performing a kind of arithmetic on herself, subtracting square footage, subtracting hours, subtracting the hardware shop and the bookshop and the trattoria with the hand-painted menu board, trying to determine what was left of a street when everything that made it itself was slowly removed. The number she kept arriving at wasn't 0, but it was frightening. She had not closed the shop, not because she was certain it would work out, not because she had a plan, but because the handwriting above the door was her mother's, and the ranunculus needed her, and the dahlias would not complement themselves, and some things are not supposed to be converted into a different kind of money. She knew that long before a man with 12 flower shops and attentive dark eyes walked through her door. He had just confirmed it. In the most unreasonable and precisely proportionate way available to him. On the morning after she signed the lease, Chiara arrived at 6 as always. She unlocked the door. She turned on the cooler lights. She talked to the ranunculus. And on the counter where the lease documents had been was a small cream card. Left tilting handwriting. The hand of a 7-year-old who was already writing like her mother. Thank you for the peonies. Papa says you are the best florist in Rome. I think so too. Lucia Chiara read it twice. Then she propped it against the vase with the 18 roses, which were on their last day now, but still open, still red, still present in the way that things are present when someone has paid the right kind of attention to them. She made coffee. Rome woke up outside. The ranunculus worried about the cold, and she told them they were going to be fine, and this time, for the first time in 14 months, she was entirely certain that she was right. Chiara kept the card on the counter for the rest of that winter. She said it was because Lucia had clearly inherited her mother's handwriting, and someone ought to appreciate it. Matteo said nothing about the card. But he noticed it was still there every time he came in. He came in often. Tell me in the comments, was it the roses in the bin? Or the coffee with Giulia? Or the moment she asked him not to tell the ranunculus they were fine? When did you know how this was going to end? If you come here for the stories where the quiet, stubborn ones turn out to be the ones who change the room, follow along. New story every day. One more thing. Lucia is 7, and she has decided that when she grows up, she wants to work in a flower shop. Matteo told her she would have to ask Chiara. Lucia wrote a formal application letter. In left-tilting handwriting. On cream card stock. It arrived at Radici on a Tuesday. That story is next.